All right, we ready to
What's going
start?
on over there?
Sorry, I was moving some shit around.
You have a garbage bag full of tin cans or something?
No, I did it sound that bad?
Yeah. Your mic's working fine.
Maybe a little too good.
All right, so we're ready.
Yeah, dude, rock and roll.
Fire that fucking pigskin.
Fire that pigskin. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Master Debate with Quaid. I am your host, Quaid McDade. I am joined by Nick and Adam yet again. We are coming off of last week where Nick had a win. The topic last week was, what was the topic last week? Best shows, best
TV shows
of all time, right? And Nick comes off a win here. Nick, welcome to the show, brother. How we doing?
No, I'm doing fan-freaking-tastic. How about yourself?
Pretty darn good. Did you weather the storm down there? Did you get hit with the hurricane at all, Florence?
Nah, not a drop.
Not even a bit.
Not even a bit. That was well north of us.
Stayed way north. You got another one coming through, Isaac or something, or not?
Nah, that one fell apart.
Fell apart. Well, that shows you how much I pay attention.
Yeah.
I'd like to say I'm worried about you, but I'm not. Adam, how you doing, my man?
I'm pretty good. Awake, right?
Are you?
Kind of. So yeah, I'm doing
Somewhat.
good though. Yeah, I think we got more hurricane than Nick did, but we didn't really get that much either. I thought we were gonna get a ton of rain from that, but it wasn't too bad. It rained all day.
Did you guys get some rain down there, Adam?
Yeah, we got it rained last night and pretty much not last night, Sunday night and then all Monday. But today it was fine. I guess it's gonna be not a big deal.
Yeah, we've actually got nothing up here in northwestern Pennsylvania. It's been nice for a few days here. So piss on both of you. I don't really care. All right. Well, Adam, you got a chance to totally redeem yourself coming off a loss. This week, we are going to talk about the top 10 stand-up comedians of all time. So it's kind of not a surprise to me that we have a few in common on our two lists here, which we're going to talk about once you guys introduce them here. Not a big surprise to me, but I'll let you guys introduce them before we get to that point. Nick, since you're coming off a win, you can go ahead and introduce your list first. Your 10 top 10 stand-up comedians in no particular order.
All right, I got Joe Rogan, Dave Attell, Bert Kreischer, Louis C.K., Jim Norton, Mitch Hedberg, Eddie Murphy, Andrew Dice Clay, and Richard Pryor, and coming in at number 1, Don Rickles.
All right. Adam, let's hear your top 10 stand-up comedians in no particular order.
Okay, I have Bill Burr, Chris Rock, George Carlin, Bill Hicks, Rodney Dangerfield, Dave Chappelle, Richard Pryor, Don Rickles, Mitch Hedberg, and Eddie Murphy.
Okay, so it looks like we have 4 shared between the two lists. It looks like we have Don Rickles on both lists. We have Richard Pryor on both lists. Also Mitch Hedberg and Eddie Murphy. So what we're going to do here with those 4 is I guess we will just kind of push those 4 through. We'll have an agreement amongst the 3 of us that they do in fact belong in the top 10 conversation here. So there's not going to be a debate with those 4 since you guys both obviously agree on them being on the list. I would like to at least take a moment to say a few things and give you each a chance to talk about those four because obviously they're worth discussing, or they wouldn't be on this list. So, Nick, I'm going to give you a chance first. I'm going to tell you who I want you to talk about first. Then, Adam, I'll give you an opportunity to talk about that same person, then back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so first up, we're going to go with Don Rickles. So, Nick, what do you think about Don Rickles?
I think he's one of the funniest comedians that there ever was. One of the things I like to do on YouTube is go watch the old roast, and Don Rickles was a master at roasting. If you go watch like the old Dean Martin roast and whatnot, he is vicious. I mean, in a very friendly, lovable way, but he doesn't hold back in any regard. Like, one of my favorite things or favorite lines is like, he busts on Sammy Davis Jr. a lot. Him being a black guy caught a lot of shit. So one of the things he did was he like licked his finger and started rubbing his cheek. He like, does this wipe off? It's just he didn't hold back. He really kind of paved the way for a lot of comedians to brave new territory. And I just think when it comes down to comedians, he's one of the best for sure.
Adam, what do you think about Don Rickles? What would you like to add to it? Obviously, there's some things that you guys are probably going to agree on here. Don Rickles, what do you think?
Well, when you look at Don Rickles, I mean, when you look at him as a person, you know, he doesn't look like much. He's just not much to look at. But I mean, I think he probably goes down as one of the, you know, we have him as, you know, both on our list, but he probably does go down as a top 10 guy on anyone's list, really. And he's just really funny. He's kind of old school. I like a lot of those old school guys. They really, you know, they weren't winging it. You know, he was good and he was funny all the time, whether it was a roast or on stage or in a movie. You know, he was in Casino too. Do you remember that, Nick?
Was he?
Yeah, he was De Niro's like pit boss or whatever. He was kind of like a straight guy, you know, like a straight guy. He wasn't a mob guy. And Pesci beat him up. Remember he hit him with the phone?
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember that now.
That was one of his serious roles, though.
You know, another role he was in that, like, you wouldn't realize. He was Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He actually looks like Mr. Potato Head.
I was just going to say that. A living character of Mr. Potato Head. Is Don Rickles still alive?
No. He recently died within last year, I think.
Yeah.
Really? Huh. Okay, well, let's move along. We're going to push Don Rickles through. Let's go to Richard Pryor. So, Nick, Richard Pryor, why does he make your list?
Dude, he was just all around hilarious. I mean, his stand-up obviously was legendary. His acting, like I know it's not about actors or anything, but the See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
That movie is so fucking funny. Him and Gene Wilder did a lot of great shit together. But his stand-up was so just real and authentic to who he was as a person. I mean, he shared some really deep, intimate stuff about himself. I mean, he talked about blowing himself up while smoking crack. He talked about, you know, the fucking dudes on the side occasionally. Like, he held nothing back, which is also something that comedians in the past didn't really do. They were looking for the you know, just the funny, hacky punchline, to whereas he was getting into like deep, dark areas of his life and finding the humor in that. And that's something that you see comedians doing all the time now. Yeah,
I think you're right. And Richard Pryor was one of the first comedians to really not have any shame, you know, not hold anything back, and it didn't take any of it too serious. Adam, go ahead and chime in on Richard Pryor.
Well, the thing about Richard Pryor, like when you look at guys like Eddie Murphy or Dave Chappelle, and I know they're all black, but they all end up having similar humor. It's very funny, but it's all like it's stories from their lives basically. And Richard Pryor was the first one to really do that. Like Nick said, like he really shared, whereas the older guys were either they're doing something hacky or they were just doing
Yeah, it's awkward. I gave you the thumbs up when. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was like, did I screw something up here? But
no, I was checking my microphone. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But or they had like a character that they were being. They weren't being themselves. They were kind of had an on-stage persona where I think Richard Pryor was just a really funny guy. He had a lot of wild experiences, and he definitely shared those. And I think he's another guy who, I mean, he may be in maybe the top of the list.
Yeah,
a lot of people's lists. So,
what caused his death? Was it just a natural death?
He died of like ALS disease.
Yeah, something.
I was thinking it was something like that. I couldn't remember what it was though.
Yeah.
Okay, so Richard Pryor is getting pushed through top 10 in our list. Next up is the one and only Eddie Murphy. Nick, why did Eddie Murphy make your list?
Dude, the great thing about Eddie Murphy is the fact that when as a stand-up, the only thing we really know of Eddie Murphy as a stand-up is Raw and Delirious. And those have to be top, both of them fall in like the top 4 greatest comedy specials of all time, which is crazy because you don't know anything else of his stand-up. I mean, there's like no tapes of him as an old stand-up that exists. I'm sure there are somewhere. I haven't seen any. They're not popular. But when it comes to Raw and Delirious, it's just pure gold from start to finish. Some of the best things in there, I like in Raw when he's talking about Italians watching Rocky. I would like to repeat some of it, but he uses the N-word a good bit, and I don't think it'd be appropriate for me.
Yeah.
And then and Delirious when he talks about the ice cream truck going by and them making fun of the kid on welfare. You're on welfare, you can't afford it. Dude he's fantastic.
Or the Mr. T bit.
Yeah.
Look at Matty Cooper.
Boy, get on over here and fuck me in the ass.
Eddie Murphy has one of the great voices of all time, really. Just his voice and the way he delivers things in general is funny, even if it's not a funny statement.
Yeah.
He's donkey.
That's true.
Right.
I think one of the most tragic things about Eddie Murphy is the fact that he got into acting, because I would have loved to have seen him just continue as a stand-up. He got into acting, he quit stand-up, and I think we lost out on something that could have been really freaking amazing. Because, I mean, let's be honest, his acting career, it's pretty forgettable for the most part.
Yeah, very average. Do you think that there's a possibility that he comes back around full circle into his stand-up once he gets into his older years?
I don't think that's something you just pick back up again.
Yeah, I guess time will tell, but it's been done before. Adam, what do you think about Eddie Murphy?
I think his outfit, that like pleather, like I think one was all red.
Yeah, one was red, one was purple. Delirious red.
Like those outfits, it's like patent leather. I don't know. They're very high gloss. Just the outfits alone, but those guys back then, I mean, they put on a real show. I mean, they didn't show up in their street clothes. A lot of guys now, you see, they kind of, even for specials, they show up and they're like, like shit they wear normally. Where he came out with this like outfit that's like iconic. Like people still, would identify that, But he was really good. And it may be one of those situations where it's good that he quit because it was so great. And it's hard to top that. It's like kind of like Jimi Hendrix died. He was so great. Maybe he would have been a bum. Maybe he wouldn't have been as good, and that would have tarnished how good he really was.
Yeah, it's the old cliche saying of, it's better to burn out than to fade away. And Eddie Murphy didn't die, but in terms of his stand-up, he did. He pretty much was done, and it kind of left him on this high level that maybe if he would have kept doing it, we wouldn't even consider him in this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really good though. I mean, he obviously left an impression on a lot of other comedians that came along as well. I mean, he was an early guy who was pretty wild, had all the crazy voices, did all the,
Yeah.
So that's one to check out for sure if you're ever bored and want to watch something.
Something that's interesting to me, and Nick, you kind of touched on this when I asked if you think he'll come back around. You said no, I don't think it's something to pick up. I don't think that's something that a person ever loses. As far as comedy, it's in your personality, and he undoubtedly has to still have that in his personality. So we can only hope that at some point, for our sake, maybe he gets back into it, because there's no doubt he still has something to offer there.
It's in your personality, but practicing to write a joke and the joke structure. Yeah, there's a lot to it. It's not just like I'm a funny guy, so it's going to translate on stage. I mean, you have to learn how to deliver a joke, structure it, see what the extra fat is that you can cut out to make it a tighter joke.
Well, that's one thing that's kind of hard about, like, whenever you guys first talked about this, and then you said, oh yeah, you should have some jokes. Well, you know what? When you watch these guys do them, it's like you can't do their joke, because they did the joke and they crafted everything that they said. Every word that they said was said in a certain way. And it's like, I could read their joke, but it really wouldn't be nearly as funny as, them doing it. Like, they've crafted it and worked on it. I'm not saying he couldn't do it, but he's like a multi-millionaire, so I don't think he's going to be,
circuit working out material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're both wrong. Let's move on to our final match, our fourth and final match, the undisputed king of one-liners, Mr. Mitch Hedberg. Nick, thoughts?
Dude, he has made me laugh so hard that it's like actually hurt my stomach. He's one of the comedians I actually have his album on my iPhone, and every once in a while just play my iPhone on random different songs, and some of the comedy skits will come up, and dude, it still gets me every time. Like, his one-liners are so great. Like, I like the I wanted to whiten my teeth, but I said, fuck that, I'll just get a tan instead. It's so stupid, but it's just fantastic. It's an hour. Every time he does a special, it's an hour of just laughing.
It's very difficult to watch Mitch Hedberg stand up or listen to it and not laugh. Even at the stupid stuff that is not really even funny to you, it's difficult to not laugh.
Yeah, because of his delivery, his
right.
Yeah,
beatnik stoner delivery. It's just
right. Adam, what do you think?
Well, it's like one of those things where he'll say something outlandish because he has some observation that you've never thought of, but you've been aware of your whole entire life. And then he says it, and you'll think about it for maybe a second or two before you really laugh at it. And then whenever you think about it later, you'll laugh even harder. That's what's really funny about him.
Right. I think something that's so impressive about him is, if he's doing, or if he was doing, in past tense, obviously, if he was doing, say, an hour special, an hour of one-liners in that realm is way different than an hour of storytelling. Think about that. That's what has always impressed me. The amount of material that comes into 1 hour special for a guy like him is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
There's a one line that just pops into my head that from one of his specials. He said, "Well, I used to do drugs. I mean, I still do, but I used to also." Stuff like that is so simple, but in his delivery and the way he says it is so funny.
Yeah. I always laugh when I hear what is that? Fettuccine Alfredo, because one of his jokes is fettuccine Alfredo is mac and cheese for adults. It is.
Right. Okay, well, let's move along. Those are the four that we had in common between the two lists. Again, they are Don Rickles, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, and Mitch Hedberg. So we're going to push them through. And that means that each of you still have 6 remaining on your list. Nick, you have an opportunity to either present your first one to debate, or you can defer and let Adam bring one to the table. Nick, what do you think?
I'll defer.
Look at you.
Ooh, interesting.
Not really. I do it every time I win.
You do.
I know. That's why it's interesting. Adam, you're up. Which comedian would you like to bring to the table first?
This is tough. I'll go with the guy who got no respect, Rodney Dangerfield. So if you go back and you look at his career, like he started out and he was doing stuff in early days. He was an old guy by the time, his career ended, but he didn't really make it. And then he left and he went back out and he was, I think, a siding salesman. So he would go around, and then he started to get back in the comedy. Like years later, he got sick and tired of being at home with his wife or something. Yeah. And he's like on Johnny Carson's show. Okay. Like one night, and then selling a guy siding the next night or the next day. He's like, like people would say to him, like, wait a second, weren't you on Johnny Carson last night? Like, shouldn't you be doing something else? But he was a really funny guy, and he's a lot like Hedberg. He's one-liners, and if in his career, I mean, it was 50, 60 years worth of material. He's just one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. In one of our shows, when we first started, for some reason, we would tell jokes occasionally. It wasn't planned. We would just end the show on a joke. And the one was really funny. I said, I made up some story about how I was shooting bad or something. But you can do it for anything. And I went to my psychiatrist to see what was wrong. And he said, you're going crazy. And I said, I don't believe you. I want a second opinion. And he said, well, you're ugly too. It's just shit like that. But he talks, and it's all self-deprecating with him. Like everything he does is just like exposing, like whether he's poor or he's ugly or he's dumb or his parents hated him. His dad took him to the zoo, and when he got there, the zookeeper thanked him for bringing him back. Shit like that. And it's all real quick one-hitters, and then he's on to the next thing. Like he always made me. I mean, those are what really make me laugh. About him. That's why I really love Rodney Dangerfield. And if anybody, the one-liners, he's got to be the most classic. He got on stage, he wore the black suit, he had the red tie, the white shirt. He always looked the same, and he always had these weird things where he was grabbing his tie, he was pulling on his jacket. It was like it was a character, but I think maybe he was kind of fucked up, like obsessive compulsive about things. But it added to like what he was doing. He was just hilarious. I mean, I could go through other jokes, but like I think everyone knows Rodney Dangerfield from movies, too. But I think if you sat down and you watch his stand-up or his late night TV like Johnny Carson show appearances, I mean, those are like some of the most classic little 5-minute comedy bits that you could ever see. And I don't know, that's why I like Rodney Dangerfield. I thought he was like the best, maybe.
He does also have that perfect classic comedic voice in his delivery. You know what I mean? It's that gravelly smoker's cough sound or whatever. It just kind of adds to the experience. Nick, who are you bringing to the table up against Rodney Dangerfield?
All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna go. I'll match his character comedian with another character comedian, and I'm gonna go straight to the most controversial comedian of all time, and I'm talking about Andrew Dice Clay, the fucking Dice Man. This dude rocked the fucking 80s. I mean, he sold out Madison Square Garden in like multiple times. He was banned from so much shit. MTV banned him. the pinnacle of edginess banned Andrew Dice Clay because he's so edgy. One of the things that really made him famous was his nursery rhymes. Like Little Boy Blue, he needed the money, and Jack and Jill went up the hill, each with $1.25. Jill came down with $2.50. That fucking whore. He like the nursery rhymes are great. They're classic. I went and saw him about 5 years ago, and he did like a full 45 minutes of new material, and it was fucking killer material, hilarious. But he's one of them guys that, like any like rock band you'd go see, he has to close it out with the fucking hits. He closes his shows down with the nursery rhymes because they're so iconic, they're so loved, and he doesn't even have to say them. Like he starts it. He'll do the Little Boy Blue, put the mic out to the crowd, and everyone else finishes it for him because everybody knows it. The Dice Man is legit. He is a fucking hilarious comedian. If you ever get the chance to see him, I highly recommend it.
Have you seen him?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, about great. 5 years ago. You know how I can tell you don't listen to anything that Nick says?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking something up, honestly.
Yeah, so Nick saw the Dice Man about 5 years ago.
Tell that story again, Nick.
Go back and listen to the show tomorrow and hear the rest of the story.
Yeah. I'll just say your mic cut out.
Okay.
I didn't hear you.
So, Adam, why Rodney Dangerfield over the Dice Man?
Okay. Whenever I look at Rodney Dangerfield, and we say he's a character guy, like Dice is a character guy, wears the leather jacket and like gloves with no fingers and weird, shit like that, like they have their looks. Yeah. But whenever you listen to what Rodney says about himself, and then you look at him, you say, you know what? His parents probably did treat him that way, or his wife probably won't fuck him because he says that stuff, and you're like, this is actually really believable. And then he looks disheveled, like he's had a hard life, which he probably did.
Unfuckable, kind of.
It's almost like he had a terrible life, and he just made a bunch of jokes out of it, and that was his career.
That is very true. That is very true. Nick, why the Dice Man? You've told us why your argument for the Dice Man, but why not Rodney Dangerfield?
I really like Rodney Dangerfield because he's a fun guy and he's a comedic legend. As far as this debate, though, I think like you got to look at the fact that like Rodney Dangerfield was one of a lot of like what was that other comedian that take my wife, please? It's like there were a lot of like one-timers back in those days when he was coming up.
Yeah, like when he first started, there were like that guy was on, what was he on? Goodfellas or something. They had him, and they had those one-liners kind of like that. But those guys didn't quite go into like how awful their lives were. He changed it.
He was the best of all of those guys. But what Andrew Dice Clay did for comedy was he was able to take it from the comedy clubs and the strip clubs and the old nursing homes that these people would travel around to. And he took that shit to Madison Square Garden. He sold the bitch out. He was like really the first comedian to do that, which was impressive. And he also went from that to getting basically banned and shut out of everything because he was too controversial, which is, something that, he brings a new element to the table with the fact that like comedy was, I don't know. I give up on that. I watched Adam laughing and I couldn't. I
was actually laughing because I have all these jokes written down. and I'm thinking, man, I'm so fucking bad at doing these. Like especially reading them off. But like, if you go to work tomorrow, I guess this is my comparison for him. I guess this is why I like him. Okay, if you go to work tomorrow and you were listening to Rodney Dangerfield, you could do it with Gilbert Gottfried too, and that's another guy I didn't put on my list, but I probably should have, but I didn't think about him until now. But if you go and listen to their like one-liners, you can go to work tomorrow and tell the same thing, and you could have everyone cracking up. You could like almost redo, do 5 minutes of Dangerfield, and everyone will be laughing. I know you could do the nursery rhymes or this and that, but.
Well, it's like nursery rhymes. You just go in there and do the Dice voice, like.
I mean, we laugh about that. Yeah, I mean, maybe because it's more of a joke, though, not because he's so funny. Oh,
whatever gets you laughing.
Yeah, it does.
War. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, and I'm not. That wasn't like a funny like character because it is like. I mean, everyone on our list is funny. That's for sure. But I think Rodney Dangerfield. He says this thing where he says, I mean, nobody was nice to me whenever I was young. Even my mother, I tried to breastfeed, and she said she just wanted to be friends. I'm like, what the fuck he thinks of this shit? But it's just like, and some of his miss. Like, he could go through, if you go through all of his jokes, I'm sure some of them didn't play well. Because, I mean, if you're like Mitch Hedberg, you're rattling off a joke every minute for 50 years. It's pretty hard to be on all the time, but he makes it work pretty well. Any videos I've seen of him, they've been pretty much like at least a chuckle at all of them, and some of them you have you in stitches. So.
Well, that's, when I was watching a Dice video before this, because I knew I was going to argue for the Dice Man, and this is one that was just shot not too long ago, and he's talking about going into a donut shop, and he had to go take a piss, and he's going to the bathroom. He's gender neutral. Like, what the fuck is that? Where do I go? We used to call them trans testicles back in my day. And he's like going on this stuff about what's going on.
It's
that he doesn't like have any barrier. I mean, you have Dave Chappelle on your list. Dave Chappelle caught a shit ton of flack for making tranny jokes. He's talking about Bruce Jenner going on about that. And he's like, I kind of felt bad for Bruce. He's in the house with the Kardashians. They're getting all the attention. Why wouldn't you cut your dick off and get some love? And then he's like, you know what? I'd fuck her. It's like, because let's be honest, ain't nobody in here going to be able to tell a story about how they fucked in a gold medal Olympian.
Yeah, the Dice. I think the reason why he was so popular was because everyone knew a guy like him. I think, someone who's like over the top, probably annoying most of the time, but like some of the shit they say is so whacked that it was funny, And I mean, I don't meet people who are that funny. Like, I'm not saying like Dice. I'm saying Dice funny maybe, but like whenever I think of like Rodney Dangerfield, like I don't think I ever meet people who are like that, because I think people are too self-conscious of like the way people look at them. Like, oh man, I'm like, I know I'm not that good looking. I don't really want to point it out to everyone in the world for 40 years, but he did, and that's what was funny. It was just like, he is like, you know what? I know I know this about me, and I'm going to make up a story about it, but it's going to be funny. But I think it was the best of taking advantage of it. And it's a shame that his career didn't pop off earlier for him, but he may not have been as funny because he went through such misery, early on, so.
I think that when it comes to Rodney Dangerfield and Andrew Dice Clay, one of these people would be somebody that I would love to have sat down and had a beer with, and the other one is undoubtedly a huge asshole.
I don't know, man. Dice seems like a cool dude.
Now, I bet he's probably an arrogant prick. I just feel like you'd want to hang out with. Don't get me wrong. I think he's hilarious. I don't think it's somebody you could sit down and drink and shoot the shit with. Rodney Dangerfield was somebody you could sit down and just, have a conversation with. That's at least my take on it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Dice would be like He would just like try to take over everything.
Right. He's got to be the center of attention, where Rodney Dangerfield is really just talking and telling stories.
Yeah, everyone would want him to talk.
Right. Rightfully so. So I'll tell you what's very difficult about this topic in general is that obviously every person that we're going to talk about tonight is really funny, funny. So it's difficult to choose at any point here because, you know, it's hard for me to say that Rodney Dangerfield or Andrew Dice Clay is not funny because they're both hilarious. They're both legends. With that being said, I'm going to base my decision off the fact that I think that Nick made a great point about Andrew Dice Clay being kind of almost like a rock star in the comedic world. And his nursery rhyme stuff is legendary. And I think it's incredibly brilliant what he's able to do with those simple nursery rhymes. And the fact that he can and did sell out places like Madison Square Garden and those big venues, it kind of did something that had not been seen before. It's been seen a little bit since, but not really. And he's still somewhat relevant in the comedy world. So round one, I got to give to you, Nick, with the Dice Man, Andrew Dice Clay.
All right.
I hate to even compare anybody to this person that I'm going to bring up, but there was somebody that, you know, just in the past several years that was selling out these huge arenas, and that was Dane Cook. You guys remember Dane Cook?
Yeah.
And he was
like a joke.
He was funny at first. I thought he was really funny at first, but then once he got like real popular and real big, kind of lost his luster. And I don't really even know what happened to him, to be honest with you. I think he fell off the face of the earth.
Louis C.K. called him out as a joke thief, and that was the end of him.
Yeah. He was selling out huge arenas, though.
Yeah, but when you look at Dice's career, he pretty much did exactly the same. Like, he was totally irrelevant for like 25 years. Like, he came back recently.
It wasn't because he burnt out. It was because he got banned from everywhere.
Well, I don't know about that. I just think that you can only take so. It's just like having a drink with him. You can only take so much of him at one. Like, after a while, it's like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, also then when we were talking, when Adam, you were talking about Rodney Dangerfield and, you know, all his self-deprecating jokes and making fun of himself, it made me think of somebody else who I have actually seen in person and is really funny. And I don't know if he belongs on this list or not, but he's one of my favorites, and that's Louis Anderson. Have you guys listened to much Louis Anderson?
I haven't. I used to like his cartoon, Louis. That was
yeah. He's super funny and like super clean. You know, it doesn't bring a lot of vulgar stuff. But anyhow, moving along. Round two, Nick, you get to introduce first for round two. What you got?
Okay, I'll go with Dave Attell. Dave Attell is like, he's the modern format for new comedians. He has his whole cadence and rhyme and setting up the punchline is something that a ridiculous amount of new comedians coming out try to harness because they feel that is the best approach to joke telling. His jokes, he's another one that I mentioned Mitch Hedberg. I have his comedy album on my iPod. I also have Dave Attell's on there. Never skip them. They're so fucking funny. And like he's one of the guys that like it's close to a one-liner, some of these jokes, but then he'll like tag. And it's just the laughs do not stop. He is fantastic. I'm kind of surprised Adam didn't have him on his list, considering last week he had Late Night with Dave Attell or whatever the hell that show was that he had.
Yeah, Insomniac.
Yeah, Insomniac. Yeah, I thought he'd find your way on your list.
Well, I like Dave Attell, but I mean, I can't really remember a stand-up special or anything where I said, "Man, do you remember when Dave Attell did the You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying Dave Attell is not funny. Dave Attell is a very funny guy, but he hasn't, you know, when you talk about like Eddie Murphy or, you know, like, or even Mitch Hedberg, like he had these like specials that were long and you're like, oh man, that was so funny when he did that, you know. And Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, they have memorable ones. And that's why I would go with like Chris Rock against you. I don't have a lot of his jokes because, quite frankly, him and Chappelle, it's hard to tell any of their jokes because, like, there's a lot of
Racist stuff.
things that you can't say as a white person anyway. But okay, Bigger and Blacker, and you talk about, you know, Eddie Murphy having, you know, 2 of the top 5 or whatever. I mean, Chris Rock might have the other, like 2 of the other ones, you know, because Chris Rock, I mean, he had been in terrible movies. Like, he's been involved in terrible movies, but his stand-up has been so good that I think he's like a living legend in the stand-up world. And I'm not saying Dave Attell isn't like legendary or anything, but I just think whenever you're looking at big stand-up specials and things that just like blow your mind, he's one of these guys who'll go and tell a story, and you know, he gets into like these hot topics that you wouldn't even think that anyone would ever bring up in public. And I mean, I don't know, Bigger Blacker, if you ever want to watch something that's crazy, that's hilarious, I mean, that's such a funny special.
Yeah, when you talk about like again, voices in the way they deliver, Chris Rock is without a doubt way up on the top of that list. He has such a unique, distinct voice, and I don't know. I think almost in a weird way, it allows him to talk about things and tell stories and jokes that otherwise you couldn't really say in like a normal voice, just because it's like part of his character or whatever.
Like he does like a woman's voice, but it's his voice, just like higher. Like you're saying, I understand what you're saying. Like it's like a joke, or he'll do like real tough guy's voice. It's just his voice lower, but it's just funny how he puts it out there. I mean, I give all these guys a lot of credit. Like I tried to watch some just to kind of brush myself up. I've obviously seen everyone on my list and like some type of stand-up show, but they perform. Like you could write jokes. I mean, anybody could write jokes. I'm not saying anybody, but there's a lot of people who could write jokes. But there's very few people who could write jokes and then go out and perform them so well. And then they fine-tune them so well that it's just like, man, that's amazing. Like, it's been 20 years since Bigger and Black came out. I still think about it. I still laugh about it, you know. And I mean, there's a lot of them. Eddie Murphy's, you know, Richard Pryor, and all these guys are like the same way. They're just,
yeah, I think it's to piggyback off of what you're saying. I couldn't agree more. And this isn't necessarily just, you know, you making a point about Chris Rock. It's kind of a kudos to everybody on this list, and not to get too far off on a tangent, but it's so incredibly impressive to me. Not only that they write jokes and perform an hour stand-up special or something like that, but they completely reinvent themselves and come up with new material over and over and over again. All of these people on both of your lists have done that for years and years. It's so incredibly impressive to see somebody do that.
Well, I got to say one thing. You want to talk about stories and talking about Chris Rock stories, but, you know, Dave Attell has a story of being blackout drunk where, you know, you black out, you wake up, you're in a bar. You black out, you wake up, you're in another bar. Then you black out, you wake up, and you're at McDonald's. And you've been working there for about 3 years. And they still haven't promoted you to assistant manager. And you want to quit, but you can't because you're fucking the girl on the fry later. Your friends say she's retarded, but those titties ain't retarded.
Did you ever see his, I think it was called Old Porn with Dave?
Yeah.
It's actually a really funny show.
It is.
It's a funny TV show, and like he did it all himself, and he like puts all his effort in. He gets zero support. Like, you know, like a guy like Chris Rock says, I want to do a special. Well, HBO's on board. They got funding. They got people helping him, you know, put everything together. You know, Dave Attell wants to do a show, and they're like, I mean, we'll air it,
Yeah.
but you have to like you come up with it, you know. So that show is really funny though. I mean, as a TV show, but yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as like stand up comparison, I'd say Rock is a much bigger stand up.
Here's where I would disagree.
I mean, he did write Pootie Tang.
Yeah.
Winner.
Here's where I disagree with Chris Rock is more important as of a stand-up. Chris Rock follows in the footsteps of Pryor, Eddie Murphy. You know, he's in the same lane as Dave Chappelle.
Because he's black.
To where
he can't change his skin color, Nick.
So whereas comedians coming out today, and since Dave Attell, have used Dave Attell as the format to move forward with comedy.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with what you're saying there, Nick. Like 100% agree with it. Like I said before, this is super difficult because all these dudes are so funny. I agree with you 100%, Nick. However, I also do agree with you, Adam, in the fact that I personally, as the mediator here, think that Chris Rock is more recognizable and more I don't know if mainstream is the word I want to use, but I think so. For that reason,
wait. Before you make your ruling, I would like to bring something to the table that I think we should delay this vote. Adam molested me 30 years ago.
When you guys were like 3?
It's time I don't really want to talk about, but I just don't think you should be. If you're considering giving him a victory, I think you should consider the fact that he touched me in my no-no place.
Was it good for you or just good for him?
I was a child.
Well, so was he.
I'm not sure where we're going with this.
Neither am I. I'm very uncomfortable.
Seemed to be a tactic that's working in other places. So I thought I'd throw it out there.
Okay, well, I was going to give round 2 to Nick, but now it looks like round 2 goes to Adam and Chris Rock.
Yeah, making up lies, trying to win.
And
scheming.
I think I might go ahead and give round 3 to you also, Adam. I don't care who you bring to the table.
Am I the one bringing it?
I'm somewhat flabbergasted with that tactic there. And,
well, it's how they're stopping the Supreme Court justice.
But
here.
This was very personal amongst you guys as friends, and I think it's something that you should talk about off the air. So, Adam, you get to bring up the next one. What you got?
Well, I think this. Oh man, this is so tough because I don't have a lot of story. Well, okay, I'm gonna do this, but it might be a flop because I'm not really good at doing these story guys as far as explaining why they're so funny. But I really think that Bill Burr currently is one of the funniest people in comedy. Now he's offensive, and maybe I think he's funnier because his viewpoints are more along the lines of the way I like things, I guess. But I think Bill Burr is hilarious. And I mean, he has one thing from one of his skits. He said he went to a bar. I mean, I'm sure he made this up. And he said there's a sign there and it said, "We like our beer and our violence the same. Domestic." The guy just laughs so hard. It's so offensive, you know. But like, he had a whole different, like a whole tangent that he went on. But that was just one little part of a joke, this story joke. And I laugh. I think about that anytime, like I see a menu and has domestic beer on it. But whenever he has this other skit that did you ever see this, Nick, where he says he's sick of Michelle Obama?
No.
Oh, you haven't.
Stuff, but no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should let you introduce your guy, but basically, it's like along the lines where he's like he's sick of Michelle Obama, but really it's any first lady, and first ladies being involved. It's like as time progresses, every first lady gets a little bit more involved. They're a little chattier. They're a little bit, more in the picture, and basically he says, we didn't elect her. You know, she shouldn't be doing anything. And if it was a woman got elected, I don't want to hear from her husband. And like he's kind of being very sexist. And you can see the audience, like some of the women in the audience, they're laughing, but he's like, if someone even yelled out, I think the one I saw, that's sexist. He goes, okay, let me give you an example then. He says, all right, you have a leak in your house and you call a plumber. And the plumber comes in, he says, yeah, you have a leak upstairs and it's running down here and we got to turn the water off and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden his wife busts in and says, no, let's do this and this. And she starts saying, he says, you know what? You know what you'd say? You'd say, get the fuck out of here. I want the plumber. He's the guy who knows what he's doing. I don't want to hear from you, you know? And it's just a funny observation about first ladies or anyone, like, you know, in those situations. But it's shit like that just makes me really funny. And it continues on about, because he's very sexist in his comedy. And he's like, you know, just because Giselle fucks Tom Brady doesn't mean she's going to be the quarterback of the Rams next year and it's going to work out well for her. She's not going to be lacing bombs down the fairway, hitting wide receivers. So, I mean, I think he's really funny. His shit is really topical, like currently, but it's so not PC, which is another reason why I really love it, because it's like it offends people, but it also like brings them into the joke. So, I mean, people who are like real crybabies about the PC world, it offends them. But everyone else kind of sees this point and they're like, yeah, you know what? I'm a woman. I see your point. You know, or I'm a guy, or I'm a white guy. I see your point, or whatever.
I think every joke or every story that Bill Burr tells, everybody who listens has an opinion on that. You can't say that for a lot of other comedians. So that's a very good point. He certainly doesn't give a shit about lines being crossed. I can tell you that. Nick, who are you going to bring to the table against Bill Burr?
All right. I will agree that currently, right now, Bill Burr is the biggest name in comedy. And the reason for that is because the guy I'm bringing to the table was such a big name in comedy that it was even considered rape after he got consent to jerk off in front of two girls. And I'm talking about Louis C.K. This dude was a beast on stage. I mean, his comedy was so fucking funny. The way he would break down things, like the one thing where someone insults him by saying, "Well, suck a bag of dicks." Like, just such a throwaway comment. He's like, "Suck a bag of dicks." Like, is it like a bag of a bunch of dicks, or, you know, do I have to suck them all individually, or, you know, it's ridiculous, goofy stuff like that. One of my favorite bits from him, it was from his like last special before news broke that he liked to jerk off in front of broads that said yes.
Okay. I'm not that I'm arguing this point, because I don't think this makes him less funny, but there was a lot of women who were like, yeah, he used to do that shit. And it was like, I think that was his thing. Like, it wasn't like two girls and they said, yeah, go ahead. It was like other women too, like in the comedy world, that didn't like want to press charges or something, but they were like, yeah, he would like start doing that. Like, that was his thing.
Well, which is like, as far as I'm concerned, especially for the sake of this debate,
I don't think
I don't give a shit.
Yeah, right. But I think there were more than two, I guess, is what I'm getting.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Some Harvey Weinstein ones.
What's known is that what's out there is that he always asks consent to jerk off in front of him.
See, what I'm saying is you keep saying that, which shouldn't have any bearing on this, but I've heard differently, I guess. Yeah, well, is what I'm saying.
If it's differently, then that's you know, different standard.
So you're saying he was a gentleman.
I'm saying he got consent. I'm saying, you know, they're saying, well, he was such a big name in comedy. He was the top comedian in the country. How could I say no to that? That would ruin my career. That's how big of a comedian he was.
Yeah, kind of makes you think of Bill Cosby, who also is actually hilarious.
No, he put pills in their drink.
Well, I'm just saying they both did weird stuff, like weird perverted stuff, and crossed a bunch of lines. Anyhow,
but one was rape and one was a weird fetish.
Allegedly.
Like, how do you get so famous that consent no longer matters?
Yeah, but if you kiss a girl now, that's like rape. Like, listen to what's going on in the media. So, I mean, it's just as bad as Cosby and I mean, why are we arguing about this? This is stupid.
Yeah.
Really, we should argue about how funny he is.
But
I'm helping you out here, Nick.
One of my favorite bits in his last special was when he even took on the subject of abortion, which is usually not funny, but he's like, he's like, I kind of get where these pro-life people are coming because they feel it's, killing a baby. So you want to defend killing a baby. He's like, it kind of is like killing a baby, or it's like taking a shit. It's like, it's either, killing a baby or taking a shit. And it's just like the way he put it. It was so funny and so true that it was like, really you have to look at it as like one or the other. You can't be like, well, no, it's not like taking a shit. But like really it is if you are on that line, on that side of the line. But I mean, the way he put it out there was so fucking funny. I don't know. I'm not Louis C.K., so I can't deliver it. But I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm like, this is tough because you're in the same boat I am. You look at these like guys who are wonderful storytellers and they set things up, and there are things they'll set up at the very beginning of their hour-long special, and then at the end they bring it all together. It's like incredible, like these guys pretty much all are doing it, and so it's hard for you to really like talk about shitting and abortions or whatever, but I mean, I understand what you mean. Like he is funny. He had a show. He was I didn't really like the show myself, Louis, that show. I wasn't a fan of it.
I didn't like the FX show. I liked it when it was on HBO. He had a show on there that was really fucking funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying his comedy isn't, because I've heard him in interviews, I've seen his stand-up, and he's a funny guy, but like the show to me it wasn't my thing, but that doesn't mean, that's bad. But I think that, when you look back through, I know you said that the only reason Bill Burr is the biggest comedian now is because Louis is, whatever, he's
a pervert.
Basically, whatever we want to call him. Bill Cosby was pretty big until recent too, I think. So, but I think Bill Burr, though, because his comedy is so politically and like in this world that we're living in right now, it's like we need someone like Bill Burr, and he really hit his stride at the perfect time when it's like PC culture. And what he did? He was probably one of these comedians who was out there beating his head against the wall, touring around all these shithole places. And then he started to think, I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm just going to say exactly what I'm thinking in the funniest way I can. And that's what to me, it seems like, I'm not like, he's not like, he does set up these stories too. I mean, some of them pretty long, and they're like, just think about this. And he makes you really think about something. And then he hits you with like the most absurd things. It makes you kind of feel bad for like thinking that he's funny because like he just offended 50% of the people in the country. But I mean, I think Bill Burr ended up becoming the funniest guy or the most popular guy anyway. I think he was going to eclipse Louis C.K. regardless.
Well, here's the thing with Louis C.K. was he was more of a, he was more centrist in his opinion, to where he was able to poke shots at both sides, to where both sides kind of rallied around him and liked him up until like he, endorsed Hillary because he really hated Trump. Both sides liked him up until that point.
See, I would say the exact same thing. I'm not saying he's a centrist, but I think the way he brings people in to the joke, I think that he made, like the whole plumber example, like he pointed the woman out and said, you tell me what you would do in this situation if you think I'm being sexist. And then he did that to her, and she's like, okay, yeah, you're right. I agree with you because you're a genius and you're a comedic genius and you made it funny. And I mean, Louis, I don't know. I mean, he's like, he had his time and he was very popular, but I just think Bill Burr, I mean, he comes up with some crazy shit. I mean, the shit that he comes up with is just absurd, really.
Now, here's my biggest issue with Bill Burr, and I like Bill Burr, but he looks and sounds way too much like Ian Rappaport for my for my taste.
I know kind of what you mean because you're just racist against redheaded people, I guess. But he had this thing like I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier, but like I just keep laughing about it. It's like this whole Michelle Obama and political thing, and that whole line, because it's a story, it's like 10 minutes long. But another part of it was he's like, I'm so sick of Michelle, and she's holding up this Me Too sign, and there was these it wasn't Me Too, it was Get Our Girls Back.
Yeah,
because there was like all these girls in Africa somewhere got kidnapped by Al Qaeda or someone, ISIS, and she's holding up. He's like, you know what? I don't want to see that shit. That's fucking ridiculous. Like, what am I gonna do? And everyone's like appalled, and he lets them be appalled for like 3 seconds, and then he's like, you know what she should be doing? She should be looking across the table at her fucking husband, who's the ruler of the free world. Tell him to call some Navy SEALs and get over there and do something about it. What am I going to do? I'm a comedian. I want to sharpen my, mic stand and go after him. I'm with you, Michelle. And he goes on this big thing about, like, makes himself sound like he's retarded. But
yeah.
I did it again. I swore I wouldn't say that word anymore. But anyway, so I don't know. I don't know. I just think it's just funny. He makes political shit funny instead of everyone being so sensitive. Everyone is too sensitive.
Okay, well, I think that's something that we can all agree on. Everybody is too PC and too sensitive. Two very funny dudes here, Bill Burr and Louis C.K. I will say that, one is more perverted than the other, apparently. Kind of came out of nowhere. Allegedly, Louis C.K. is a huge pervert. I'm going to give round 3 to Adam, and let me explain why. I based this off of the fact that I think that Bill Burr is equally as funny in his interviews and podcasts as he is in his stand-up. And I personally don't feel the same about Louis C.K. I think Louis C.K. is a funny dude. Bill Burr is over-the-top hilarious, to me at least, in everything that he says. His viewpoints and the way his mind works and how quick his mind works and brings those analogies to the table, I think is something that hasn't been seen for a long time or maybe ever, to be honest with you, at least from my standpoint. So round 3, I'm giving it to Adam and Bill Burr.
Okay, let me ask you something quick, because I totally agree with you. Do you think no, I mean about him being just like, it doesn't matter in what forum he's in, the guy comes up with funny shit, and it's not like reused stuff, like I'm reusing his jokes, or I'm not
very super authentic and like right out of his head.
Yeah. Now, do you think one day, based on the world, now he's gotten away with it because he's basically saying, fuck, I don't care if I'm not PC, but do you think there's one day where he's going to say something, cross the line, and get like blackballed like Louis C.K.?
I don't think he can. Well, and let's be clear. Let's be clear. Louis C.K. didn't get blackballed for anything that he said. I mean, that I think that's what you need to think about in that question.
Yes, he did. He said, "Can I jerk off in front of you?"
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. It was his perverted actions that got him blackballed, which is a big deal. I mean, if anybody gave a shit about Bill Burr's opinions, he would have already been blackballed. So I can't imagine anything that he could say within reason that would get him blackballed, simply because he's already crossed every line that's ever been presented in front of him.
That's pretty much true. I hope that doesn't happen.
You can be offended by it, and people do get offended by the stuff that he says, but at the end of the day, there's more people willing to get over it and listen to him for comedic relief than there is people that are willing to be offended and blackballed. To be blackballed, you have to have a large number of people willing to not ever listen to your shit again. I don't see that happening with Bill Burr, because I think there's a large number of people, probably myself and you guys included, maybe not, I can't speak for you guys, but that can relate to a lot of things that he says. and can appreciate somebody actually that has the spotlight having the balls to say the things that he says.
I agree. Good choice.
Okay, so round number 4, Nick, you get to bring yours to the table first. What do you got?
All right, I'm going with little Jimmy Norton. This guy is probably one of the most prolific comedians of our time. He comes out with at least one special every year. He's hilarious. He has evolved as a comedian, something that you don't see all that often. You kind of see a lane, and he started out as a pretty perverted dude talking about banging trannies and all the other fun stuff he would do as a wee lad. And then he's gotten more into current issues. His take on society and everything is really hilarious. He is able to do, a quick delivery on a joke, and he's also able to set up a story. So he's pretty versatile in that category. He also was third mic on the Opie and Anthony radio show, which was one of the premier shows in the comedic world. That show featured a massive amount of comedians coming through and actually helped launch careers of people like Robert Kelly and Patrice O'Neill, and Bill Burr was one of the early guests that would come on there. And he was, instrumental in getting those guys in and making Opie and Anthony a staple in the comedy world. And
so
be what it is today.
So Jim Norton, if I'm not mistaken, I think is like one of the all-time like huge perverts. Like not like perverted like Louis C.K. jerking off in front of people, but like into, whether it is or it was in the back in the day, into some real weird shit.
Yes.
And has no problem discussing it and making jokes about it, which you have to appreciate somebody caring so little about their reputation and how people view them to be able to do that. The Opie and Anthony show, obviously huge show. Maybe Howard Stern, and they might be right below that, you think, or what? I mean, it's on that level.
Yeah, below Howard Stern for sure. But the what they did as far as being an open, like, revolving door for comedians to come in and really give them like a national platform, they were more important to the comedy world than Howard Stern was because of the open door that they had.
Sure. I'm simply referring to, as far as popularity in general, they weren't quite on the same scale as Howard Stern, but I don't think they were probably too far below that.
Yeah, me either.
Adam, what do you got to put up against the perverted Jim Norton?
So who am I arguing against? Opie and Anthony or
that
Ed
was
Norton?
A sidetrack, so you don't have to be an asshole. Just a side comment.
Well, I have two guys who are absolute legends, and I think I'll just go with Dave Chappelle. It's tough to pick between these guys because they're both on legendary status, and they still are. And I mean, I think they still are. But Dave Chappelle, he had this stand-up, and it was funny when you watch back through Dave Chappelle. Like, he was really funny, but in a totally different way than he is now. Like, he was really funny. He's an observational comedian, like, where he's, telling stories. He's a lot like a lot of these other guys. Everyone's telling stories from where their opinions on things they see. But like, as he's gotten older, he's gotten like different. He's changed a lot in a good way. But I could just, he had the show, but then he disappeared, and now Netflix has him back, and his specials are really funny. But they had him on Saturday Night Live, like right after. It wasn't like planned for this, because I think it was like on Tuesday, Trump won the election. He's on Saturday Night Live on Saturday. So Nick, you're laughing already. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, I saw that episode.
Okay, so for those who didn't see it, because I don't watch Saturday Night Live, but this was so funny. It was about the funniest thing that's been on Saturday Night Live in 20 years. So, a couple of the things, like the one was, he's like, he's going on and on. He's like, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Everyone in that community is very, Hillary.
Yeah.
He's like, I hate to admit it, but I stayed at Trump Hotel last night. Man, that guy knows how to, and he uses words, funny words, just the way he uses them. He's like, that guy really knows how to, what the fuck did he say? He makes a swell hotel suite. And he said, this morning, housekeeper came in. I said, hey, housekeeper. Then I reached over, grabbed a handful of pussy, and I said, hey, the boss said it was okay. Whenever you're talking about topical, he had to come up with that. Like, he didn't write that joke until, later in that week. And to think about that, the motherfucker may have been staying in a Trump hotel. And not that he did that, but he was probably thinking about it. And then along the lines in the same sketch, I'm just saying this whole, Saturday Night Live thing, it made you remember how much you love Dave Chappelle. If you hadn't, because this was, basically, he had been away, after his show. There's some clips of him on the internet, but then this was before the Netflix special, I think, or before I saw it. He's like, yeah, all my black friends, they said, hey, Dave, you out? I'm leaving. I'm done. You going with us? I'm out of the country. Trump's president. He said, nah, dog. I'm good. I'm going to stick around, see how this tax break works out for me. And then he goes into this big rant about how, I was poor forever. And then I finally got money, and we get this president who says, you know what? You should give all your money away. And I'm thinking, no, motherfucker. And he probably said a lot of other things. But he goes, so I'm finally having money and got to get a tax break. I'm like, this may work out for me. But no one in that crowd was thinking, because everyone in that crowd 4 days after that election was completely traumatized. And I guess that's my point about his genius. The guy basically comes up with this shit, and he makes that situation that all those people were feeling, because they would probably went to Saturday Night Live to watch it and to not even think about Trump as far as him actually being their president. And he made it funny, So I don't know. I think Dave Chappelle is one of the funniest stand-ups. His stand-ups on Netflix are absolutely hilarious. He got paid handsomely for them, so well deserved.
He is a very funny stand-up, but again, getting back to Jim Norton, I think he's actually funnier. He's got a lot darker life, which leads to, especially if you have a very twisted sense of humor, it leads to a lot more funny scenarios. He also, some of his observational stuff, like one of the jokes that makes me laugh off of his first special is it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if you don't believe me, just walk up to a woman that has a baby carriage and go, hey, nice baby. Mind if I touch it? It's so true. It's it's funny. The perverted stuff is just, it crosses a line for even the most perverted people, but you can't help but just laugh your ass off at the detail that he'll go into, and because he's willing to cross the line and be so perverted, it really paints a disgusting picture.
And he's being very serious in those things.
Very serious. Another one of his bits that was one of my all-time favorites was I guess he had a crazy girlfriend, and she would say a bunch of just off the wall shit to him. And so what he did for 6 months is just write down all the off the wall shit that she would say. What was the other one? The one was Oh yeah, when I was sucking your dick, I burped. It tastes like onion and blah blah blah. It's just so he's like, I don't know. I love Jim Norton. I think he's hilarious, filthy, and again, getting into what he did as far as his importance to the comedy world and on the radio side of it is just something I don't think could be matched.
Yeah, but I mean, you could say the same thing. I know that you're saying that show didn't have, Howard Stern didn't have comedians, but Artie Lang was on there, and they had, Gilbert Godfrey was in there. There was a lot of, I would say maybe more of the mainstream guys were in Howard Stern, whereas you're saying maybe some of the guys who are maybe not like the road comics. So
the guys that came up that really have pretty good careers now. Well, not so much Patrice because he died. But like Bill Burr being the main one, Louis C.K. came up through Opie and Anthony. That was
I know, but to say that like, oh, that's why they're big. I think all those guys, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, even Patrice O'Neal, those guys, they were funny. They were funny guys. The show didn't make them funnier. They may have given them some more exposure. Or they could pump up their tour dates, but I think
gave them a platform for sure. It gave them a platform.
I just think that for Ed Norton or what's his name, Ken Norton, Jim Norton.
Yeah, Jim Norton.
Okay,
Ken Norton
off,
Jr.
Ed Norton is an actor. Ken Norton is a football player, and this is Jim Norton. He's a comedian. Go ahead.
His dad, Ken Norton Sr., was a boxer, so they're all related, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, I guess. Yeah, for me, Dave Chappelle is like, if there was a handful of comics, like of any comics, I may pick Dave Chappelle out of all of them to watch. If someone said, "Hey, do you want to see this person live?" I might go see Dave Chappelle over anybody. I just think he's funny. I just think the shit he comes up with, and I know you'll say, "Oh, he's like Eddie Murphy or he's like Richard Pryor because he's black," but Nick, I don't think that's a real fair judgment.
Yeah, so
no, I wasn't going to say that. There's other reasons he's like those guys. He also has short hair.
Well, no, I guess Pryor had a little bit more hair at times, but yeah, he did have short hair.
So I think this is another tough one for me because I am a big fan of Jim Norton and Dave Chappelle both. I think they're both very different comedians. They both are very different in their personalities and their type of comedy. They're both also very relevant still. Although Chappelle kind of took a hiatus, they're both still relevant in the comedy world today, which makes it very difficult because they're both kind of, fresh in our minds right now. I have to base this off of the fact that I think that one of these people is more widespread than the other, and I think that Jim Norton is super, super funny to a very particular crowd. I think that Dave Chappelle is super funny to the masses. And for that reason alone, I have to give this round to Adam and Dave Chappelle. I'm also going to base that off the fact that, Adam, I think you did a slightly better job. Nick, don't take this the wrong way. You did a good job of presenting some of Jim Norton's material.
I flubbed it in the end.
Yeah, you did, and I think you're aware of that. Adam, I think you did a slightly better job of presenting some of Dave Chappelle's material, some of his older stuff, but also you touched on some very recent stuff that he's talked about. So for those reasons, I'm going to give this round to Adam and Dave Chappelle. So I want to touch on something real quick before we get to the next two. Somebody I thought about in terms of, modern day relevancy in terms of comedy. What do you guys think, and what's your take on Daniel Tosh?
Me personally, I think like I thought his show was funny, at least originally. Daniel Tosh to me was really funny.
I think he's hilarious
because it's like kind of like along that really super perverted, you know. Yeah, it's not like that crazy where it's like insensitive, but it's funny. It's like a lot more than a lot of comics do. And I mean, I say that, but I'm saying a lot of big comics.
He pushes a lot of boundaries in terms of sexism, racism, and all of those types of things, and he crosses those lines. I think that's, not everybody can do that and get away with it. I think he does it, and I think he's brilliant at it, and I think he's hilarious. Nick, what do you think about Daniel Tosh?
I like Daniel Tosh. He also kind of falls into the Dave Attell category that a lot of people are taking his format, a lot of young comedians.
Yeah.
Because that's a good way to set up jokes and deliver them and whatnot.
Sure. I mean, he's arguably one of the biggest ones right now, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, but for some reason, in my opinion, he's kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I feel like he was bigger 2 or 3 years ago, probably.
Probably about 3 years ago was his heyday.
Yeah.
I think his show's still on, isn't it? I don't know. I don't watch, I never watch Comedy Central anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
For anything.
Well, we got a winner. We don't have to do this last round. If
we do, we have a winner. But listen, it's up to you guys. I would love to do this fifth and final round simply because I think this is a great topic, and these guys are so funny. So if you guys want to do it quick, we could do this fifth round real quick.
Or we could just kind of, instead of giving the intro, we could kind of just go through them quick if you wanted, Nick. Like, if you want to just spit your guys out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you both have 2 left, right?
Yeah.
Adam, you have, let's see, George Carlin and Bill Hicks. And then Nick, you have Bert Kreischer and Joe Rogan. So, right. Adam, we'll let you go ahead and discuss one of yours first.
Okay. I'll just do Bill Hicks real quick. I mean, Bill Hicks is like a forgotten guy because he died at a young age. I think he was a drug guy too. But he is like really funny. He's one of these guys, it's hard to really come up with a lot that he's said because he's a story guy. And you could see he's one of these guys who, when he probably worked on the way he said these jokes for so long to make them perfect. But he tells one, I'll try to do it, but I'm going to fuck it up because he does it way better than I would. But he said, one night he was in Nashville. He got done with his show. It was like 3 a.m. He went to a Waffle House. So he's all alone. He's reading a book and, drink coffee, eating food. And, I'm not sure where he's from, but he's obviously not from the South. And he said the waitress came. I think
he's from Texas.
Oh, is he? Well, like he comes across as an intelligent guy, I guess, is in his comedy. Like it's like he's a well thought out guy. It's perverted, but it's still well thought out. But right. So the waitress comes over and she says, "What you reading for?" And he said, I was shocked. I just sat there because I've never been asked, "What are you reading for?" Usually it's, "What are you reading?" And I said, I've never been asked that question before. And I said, well, damn it, you stumped me. There's a lot of reasons that, I read. And one of them's pretty much at the top of my list would be I read so I don't have to be a waffle waitress. And he says, then this trucker stands up. And he's standing over him and he says, "Well, boys, it looks like we got ourselves a reader." And it was just funny the way he did it, like he's some outcast, like like he's in a foreign land. He's like in Nashville.
He was actually born in Georgia. Yeah,
I guarantee he told that joke in Nashville, and they probably still thought it was funny. But he was doing this other one where I would kind of try to explain it, but I won't, because the people he's talking about are very, very irrelevant. But he's basically saying like one's a host of a show and he's actually Satan, and then some guy who's like a comedian comes in to like Did you ever hear that? And he talks about basically Satan fucking this guy and spawning his, and he goes through this whole big thing, and then him shitting out this baby. And I mean, it's so involved. I mean, it was so funny. It just goes on and on.
There was a documentary about him a couple years ago that was just really good.
Oh, really? I never saw that.
Also, did you hear the conspiracy that he faked his own death and he's actually Alex Jones?
No, I've never heard that.
Yeah,
but I love that. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah, you'll have to look into that one. Yeah, he's because that's his final joke to the world. Is him being Alex Jones. But
Nick,
like some people really
you
believe.
have left. You want to bring one of them up and discuss it?
Yes. Bert Kreischer, he's I wouldn't say he's a new comedian, but he's
newly popular.
Yeah, he's got this extra level of fame just recently. He's a great storyteller. The thing about Bert was he became famous because of a article in the Rolling Stone about, basically it was about the real Van Wilder, and it was him. And one of the main stories from back then was when his class went to Russia on a field trip, and like within 2 days he's robbing his classmates with the Russian mafia. Mm-hmm. And on the train, and it's the wildest, funniest story, and the way he tells it. And my favorite thing about Bert, like normally when people start laughing at their own shit, it's not funny, but his laugh is just so hilarious when he just starts going into these details and he can't contain himself anymore. It's I don't know. To me, it's comes off very authentic. It's very funny. His stories are.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and he is such a great storyteller. When he laughs at his own stuff like that, it's truly blowing his mind. You know what I mean? Like he's telling a story, and he knows it's unbelievable. And he's like to himself, he's like, "Holy shit, yeah, this really happened, and I can't believe it, even as I'm telling it." And it is so authentic, like you said.
Yeah, so I like Bert. Like him a lot.
Yeah, I like him too. Now, see, I can see why you didn't argue him, because he is pretty new. Like special wise, he's had one big one, then he's got a new one out. So like, I could see not arguing for him, and that's another reason why I probably didn't put him on my list, because I really like him too. It's just his body of work isn't quite as big as a lot of these other guys. Yeah, but he's really funny.
Adam, what do you got for your last one?
Yeah, my last one is George Carlin. George Carlin, I mean, he's a comedy legend. I mean, he was a stand-up comedian in 5 different decades. I mean, the guy had been around forever. Like he has the 7 dirty words you can't say on television. I mean, that's a classic bit. Yeah. The 10 Commandments. I mean, he said a lot of controversial things because he was I'm assuming he is very, like he was very strict on what he believed. He didn't believe in God. He was very, like, I don't know, like just a lot of things. Like he was very verbal about these things, but he made them really funny over the years. So I mean, I've seen specials of his I actually saw him on his last tour live before he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. It was like within maybe a month or 2, something like that.
Wow.
It wasn't long. Like he was working on that new special, and he had his notes up there, and you could see like it was different than I ever expected it to be. Because you're going to see George Carlin and you're at this big theater, and he's going to be like he is on TV that you've been watching for the last 20 years. But he wasn't. He had all these notes up there, and he was checking his notes, and he was working through his material, which was, for me, like a kind of an interesting way to see someone. But yeah, but he was really funny. He was always really funny. He could really offend people though.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would talk real fast, and then he would finish with a really funny line. You know what I mean? You ever hear him go, like he builds up to something, he keeps building up and he gets real fast. Yeah, it was like his delivery was really good.
Yeah, it would be hard to argue that George Carlin is not, one of the legends of stand-up. I mean, he certainly is. Nick, what do you have for your last one?
Joe Rogan. I've seen him live. Very funny dude as a stand-up. Obviously, you know what he's done as a podcaster. I mean, really, his podcasting chair, like, you know, opposite of him has become basically the new Tonight Show chair. Like once, like you always looked at like sitting down with Leno, well, us, you know, sitting down with Leno before us sitting down with Carson. That was making it. Now it's getting on the Joe Rogan show.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He did one not too long ago with Elon Musk. I don't know if you'd listened to that one or not, but it was fascinating.
Yeah, we did. It was very influential, good or bad. It was very influential.
Right. I think that Joe Rogan really solidifies the intelligence that it takes to be a stand-up comedian, because you don't always see the intelligence that's behind the comedian when they're doing their stand-up, but you certainly get an insight into his intelligence from the podcast. And undoubtedly, all of these people that are on these both of your lists are highly intelligent. It's just interesting to see it from a different light during a podcast. Bill Burr does one too. I'm sure there's some other guys on these lists that do them. It's really neat to see them in a different light, and you really realize how highly intelligent they are.
Right. Adam, who else were you considering on your list?
Like I said, I would have probably threw Gilbert Godfrey on there. I love Gilbert because he has like some one-liners that are really, really funny. He's one that I could argue well for because you could have a lot of jokes and I could tell them and they would be funny, you know. Whereas whenever I'm trying to tell these stories, it's not that funny. But it's like you get the gist of it. Just go YouTube it. You'll have a much better time than listening to me. But there were a couple that I can't think of now. I didn't write them down. And I was like, there's a lot of good stand-ups. And I've always been a big fan of stand-up. There's a lot of guys who have been around a long time who are funny. Yeah. But I mean, we didn't even talk about guys like Seinfeld or like even Leno. They said he was like a really great stand-up.
Right. Yeah,
he didn't do
it. He didn't what?
He didn't do it like that alone though. So I think he became more famous like to the general public from the show, like the talk.
He kind of had a somewhat small body of work because I think Leno was more like it was almost just like a hobby, and he was good at it and he was funny, but it's not what he became well known for.
You need to listen to some stories of Leno's coming up. That dude has made so much money off stand-up, he hasn't even got into the Tonight Show money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't doubt that, but I'm saying as far as the masses knowing him and his name, it's his show more so than it was his stand-up. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. What was man, it's slipping my mind. He had a TV show on HBO. He died. Oh man, he's man, it's terrible. I'm terribly ruining the show right now, but damn it. Well, who else did you think of?
I know who you're talking about. My number 11 on my list was Robert Schimmel, who he died, I'd say, 10 years back?
Yeah, I love Robert Schimmel.
Yeah, he was so freaking funny. Probably one of the, like, I laughed harder at his special than I think anybody else. I mean, it was just, he's so funny. And then another one that I considered putting on was Stephen Lynch, who is a singing comedian. The crazy thing about Stephen Lynch is he's actually a really gifted musician, to where, as you know, a lot of these musician comedians, it's kind of annoying and it's hacky, but the music's pretty good, and his build-up delivery, you know, punchline of the song is great. And Yeah, I mean, I think he's the best of the singing musicians. Is kind of why I
Yeah.
consider putting him on.
But there's like stand-up guys, they're dirty guys. There's guys who do clean. And then the guy I was thinking of was Gary Shandling.
Okay.
He was a really funny stand-up, but he had the Larry Sanders Show. It was really funny back in the '90s. But there's guys who do props like Carrot Top and all these other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's just kinds of comedians.
I
don't like them all. I guess
There's somebody that I'm not surprised this guy didn't make either list, but he certainly has made his mark, and that's Larry the Cable Guy. Whether you like him or not, and it's kind of that redneck humor. He was selling out stadiums, dude. Like
Blue Collar Tour.
Well,
yeah, like big time.
I didn't consider Larry the Cable Guy. One of the guys that I kind of, after I sent my list, I was like, shit.
That White.
Ron White.
Yeah. Ron White's good too. Yeah,
there's a legit like comedian. Like to whereas Larry the Cable Guy, he's a character. Yeah,
he's a character.
I mean,
Larry the Cable Guy is 100% a character. Ron White's more of a drunk guy telling stories. It's really funny.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I kind of thought that maybe Robin Williams would make a list. He's super funny in my mind.
He is. I like him, but you could argue against him pretty easily because he was kind of known as a joke thief.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
You were waiting for me to set the trap on me. I wasn't a Robin Williams fan, stand-up wise. You could say Steve Martin, though. Steve Martin was a good stand-up, but
I never liked Steve Martin in basically anything.
Really? You've never seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels? Oh man, it's so funny.
I don't remember. I'm like,
or The Jerk, the movie The Jerk.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you The Jerk.
Steve Martin has a strange sense of humor, really.
Yeah. His old. I'm not like a fan of whatever that one where he's Queen Latifah or dating. I don't know what movie. I wasn't going.
The one they were going to give us free tickets to.
When they were
Stephen King movie. Walked into the movie.
I'll tell you.
Pumped up to go to this horror movie. We walk in, we're like, man, I know we're like 5 minutes late, but fuck, this is a lot of action. All of a sudden, the credits roll.
Yeah, we see the end.
Fuck? Yeah,
I'll tell you. If I was going to make my own list of 10, who would be on my list, and that would be Cat Williams. Are you guys a fan of Cat Williams?
Really?
I thought Cat Williams was funny initially, but he didn't have like a real long span.
He doesn't.
He's kind of crazy.
He doesn't have a huge body of work, but in my opinion, he's absolutely hilarious, and he still is. He's actually back now and still relevant.
Is he?
He took a little hiatus. I think he got locked up for a while. He kind of went off the deep end, got arrested or something, put in jail, I think.
Yeah, he was doing some wild shit there.
Yeah. He has that real weird, crazy voice and like the perfect delivery where it's just like so far out there. Kind of like Chris Rock or something like that.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. That's what'd you say? Another one of those black comedians.
Yeah, that you're comparing it to.
Right. My bad. We're going to wrap this up. It looks like Adam gets the win. Adam took 3 to Nick's 1. Nick won round 1 with Andrew Dice Clay. Oh, you fucking whore. Adam got round 2 with Chris Rock, round 3 with Bill Burr, and round 4 with Dave Chappelle. This was a super interesting one to talk about. I know we kind of went over. I think we talked for almost 2 hours, I think. But
long fucking time.
It kind of goes to show you the quality of all these guys on these lists because it went pretty fast and you guys had some great points. So job well done. I enjoyed listening to both sides of the debate tonight, and hopefully if you're listening to this, you're not bored yet and you'll come check us out next Tuesday. I am Quade McDade signing off.